Good morning. It is 9 a.m. on Wednesday, August 13th, 2014, and this meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority is now in session. Mr. Tejas, are there any public comments? Item 3, adoption of minutes from the CRRMA board meeting of July 17th, 2014. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those? Are there any addition changes? If not, is there a motion?
I have one change. They have Lori Finnenbach instead of Dory Finnenbach on the attendees.
Good catch, Susan. Thank you. Any other changes? If there's all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The minutes from the board meeting of July 17th, 2014 are approved. Item 4, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a management services agreement with the city of El Paso. Mr. Tejas.
Good morning. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real RMA. So today before us we've got item number 4, which is the management services agreement. Going back in time when the Regional Mobility Authority was created, we were actually, as you all know, we are a unique regional mobility authority in that we were created by a municipality. To date, I believe we are still the only municipally created RMA in the state. Because of that, we've got a very close relationship with the city of El Paso. When we were first created, we had even less staff than we do now, which really meant that the city of El Paso provided virtually all of the services to the Regional Mobility Authority when it was created. We entered into, at that time, the Regional Mobility Authority entered into a management agreement with the city of El Paso whereby the city agreed to provide an executive director, administrative assistant, office space, computers, phones, and the like, and fiscal and services as a fiscal agent. And that agreement has been in place since 2008. Since then, of course, we've that contract was a 5-year term, and now we're moving into the second agreement. So that's what you see before you is really a new management services agreement. Really what we're looking at doing in this particular agreement is essentially the same, extending the relationship between the city and the Regional Mobility Authority. What we're doing, though, is adding a couple of components, and the main one that we are adding is actually a new position. So going back, the original relationship had the city of El Paso providing the executive director. However, the Regional Mobility Authority pays 100%, reimburses the city of El Paso 100% for the executive director position. The administrative agent that the city provides is actually in-kind services, so that's provided by the city at the city's cost. Now the third position that I was referring to is now a shared position where, and it's actually an individual out of the OMB division of the city of El Paso with finance background. I think that that's obviously going to be very helpful for us as we move forward with these high-dollar projects. So the idea here now is to add a position that is split. It's a shared cost. So the expenses, and you'll see this later in the project budget as well, the position from OMB, 1/2 of the salary and benefits will be reimbursed by the Regional Mobility Authority. The other half will be absorbed by the city of El Paso. So that's the main change here. This is another 5-year contract. And we kept the provisions related to office space, phones, computers, and the like. So really, that's the main distinction, is the addition of the OMB person.
Any questions from the board? As Mr. Tejas mentioned, this is another 5-year agreement. Fairly closely mirrors what we did before, except with the addition of the OMB person. We've asked Mr. Tejas to try to work to delegate more of those authorities, more duties, and this OMB person, I think, will assist us greatly as we're looking at the finance piece of our business in regards to the city and some of the other reporting that's required. So if there are no questions, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 4 carries. Item 5, discussion and action on our board resolutions authorizing the executive director to execute the following instruments as they relate to the El Paso streetcar project. A, an assignment of the agreement for professional services agreement with the city of El Paso and URS Corporation. B, amendment to the assigned agreement for professional services agreement with the URS Corporation for the addition of the interim scope and project for the project. And C, the advanced funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation. Mr. Tejas.
So for this item, you've likely heard a great deal about this so far, but I want to give a brief overview, and then I'd like for a representative from the URS Corporation who's here with us today to walk us through the project, what's been completed to date, and really what the next steps are. So let me speak very generally about this project. This project, as you know, was commenced under the City of El Paso. They allocated various design funds for the development of the alignment, the proposed alignment, the proposed program in total, and really brought on the URS Corporation to develop the design for the work. After that, they began searching for construction dollars. Since then, the construction dollars, as you all have heard, have become available through TxDOT, and the RMA is being proposed to actually manage the construction of the program. At which point, once it's open and operating, then it would revert back to Sun Metro for operations thereafter. So in concept, that's really what's being looked at. Specifically for our agenda, we have 3 items before you. The first item, then, going back to the idea where the city brought on URS to complete the design work and get through the bidding and the construction. The City of El Paso, through item 5A, would then assign the design contract between the City of El Paso and URS to the Camino Real RMA. So at that point, then, if item 5A passes, the relationship with URS would then be with the Camino Real RMA. So then that gives rise to item 5B, which is then an amendment to the agreement between the RMA and URS to allow for the development of what we're referring to as an interim scope. And I should have mentioned this as well. When the City of El Paso passed item 5A on their council meeting a couple weeks back, not only did they authorize the assignment of the agreement between the city and URS, they also actually provided an additional over $124,000 to be assigned to the Regional Mobility Authority so that the RMA could continue to develop the program and get the bidding documents ready so that while we wait and work towards the release of the TxDOT construction dollars, the $97 million that will come, we're not sitting on our hands and we're not wasting time. So that $124,000 from the City of El Paso will help us through this interim scope under item 5B to continue to progress the project and get us even closer to the bid. So that's what item 5B is looking to do. Then lastly, as I briefly referenced, there appears to be $97 million available from TxDOT for the construction of the project. So in order to access those funds, of course, we need an advance funding agreement with TxDOT. So what you have as part of your backup is the most recent draft that we've worked with TxDOT on for the advance funding agreement. So those are the 3 items and how they work together. So at this point, and of course subject to your questions, I'll ask Mr. Jim Etherton to come up to the podium, and I'll ask IT to pull up the PowerPoint. We're going to ask Mr. Etherton from URS Corporation to walk through the project since they've been involved with it obviously since day one. Talk a little bit about where it's been and where it is now, and more importantly where we're headed. So, Mr. Etherton.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. My name is Jim Etherton. I'm the project principal for the streetcar project with URS, and wanted to start off with some history of the project, which goes back to the early 1900s, where early on the city had streetcars that ran as long as 60 miles in length on trackage in the city. And then moving quickly to the 60s, where the streetcars that we're proposing be renovated, these are the exact cars we're looking at to call the PCC cars that will be retained and refurbished. Then going past the 60s, the system also operated as an international trolley route across the border and continued service until 1974. In 2010, there were multiple studies over the years, and particularly there was a study regarding the restoration of the existing streetcars, and there was a TxDOT-funded study that provided for a single route from the downtown area to the Cleveland Entertainment District that's shown on this graphic here. And then in spring of 2012, there was an RFQ from the city to perform streetcar design. The city retained URS to continue that, and there was a decision by City Council to refurbish the PCC cars that you saw in the earlier slides. We were also retained to do design, plans, and specifications, and we also conducted a state categorical exclusion environmental process from the state and received approval from that. And then design was completed about a year ago in June of 2013. We received some additional comments on our plans and specifications from the city and addressed those early part of this year. And then, as Raymond indicated, funding from TxDOT is now available for construction. We've attempted to use local consultants and sub-consultants on the team here in El Paso. These are some of the firms that were involved with the project up to this date. This is a map that shows roughly the area of the route. There are two loops. One is the downtown area to the right, the one left and right, and going towards the Cleveland Entertainment District on the far left end is the route. And there's a circulation that's perceived to be a figure 8, where it goes clockwise on one loop and counterclockwise on the other loop. And there's a possibility of the downtown loop, which is the smaller of the two loops, to be a separate loop, so that there's more intervals and less waiting for passengers to wait at those stops. The alignment does attempt to avoid impact to some of the historical districts within the city as well. There is a rendering of the proposed maintenance and storage facility. This facility will be located next to the downtown transfer center that currently exists. The purpose of this facility is to do routine maintenance on the vehicles, store the vehicles at night, and then also be close to the proposed trackage. And we don't anticipate any real impacts to the Sun Metro bus operations that are currently underway using this facility. This graphic here shows in the center the existing facility building, and with all of those lines around it, it shows the fact that vehicles will access this building, which is located in the lower part of this graphic, and vehicles will circulate around the existing transfer building as well as go into the maintenance facility. But you can see on the roadway for Santa Fe on the right side going up and down, that's your main track, and then there's the ability for a vehicle to make a loop to access the facility at that location. So within that building there are going to be pits for maintenance personnel to access the bottom part of the carriages and do routine maintenance, as well as the ability to store some of the vehicles within the building at night. Currently, as you probably are aware, many of these vehicles are being stored at the airport and some other locations here in town. The vehicles have been inspected. The real value of the vehicles is the shell of the body itself. It's not the glass, it's not the seats, it's not the carpet, it's the shell itself. So the current plans and specifications assume that these vehicles will be shipped to a manufacturer who has expertise in remanufacturing these vehicles and bringing them back in a like new state. So most of the trucks, the electronics, the motors, and the seats and all of the interior will appear brand new. The guideway itself is designed in order to minimize impact to existing utilities and sidewalks and such. There is a wire that goes over that powers the vehicle. It has roughly a minimum height of 18 feet and 6 inches above the vehicle at all times. And the poles that you see just to the left of the track are there on a spacing which creates about 500 of these poles have to be introduced in order to maintain that wire. We try to accommodate Americans with Disabilities Act access and requirements. There are landing platforms and also signals and some other infrastructure that goes along with the track itself. because the existing roadways have a cross slope, or if you're driving down a lane, a roadway, and the left side of the lane is higher than the right side of the lane, in order to maximize the rail life and reduce the wear on the rail itself as well as the wheel, we attempt to get the two rails roughly at the same height so that provides a smooth ride and also that reduced wear. We do have some roadways that have some slopes to them that we want to make sure don't create an issue, so we have provided specifications to those companies who might remanufacture the vehicles to make sure that if they're going up a hill or going down a hill, both the propulsion system as well as the braking system will work in a safe manner. This is simply a graphic to show that when the vehicle track goes through an intersection and makes a turn, that we've looked at manholes and pipes and other utilities in order to try to make sure that there's no manholes or anything under the track, and that there is access to those pipes that go under the track once the system is built. This graphic shows that those wires that provide the electricity to the vehicles, that track and the wires have to track a lot. And so an example is the new ballpark. We requested that some connections, some metal plates be placed in the ballpark building that provide some span wires that allow that wire to track right on top of the vehicle rail tracks so that we provide power. All of those other wires are higher than 18'6". So the lowest wire is the energized wire right over where the vehicle goes, and all of the other support wires would be higher than that. We also have some bridges on the project, some bridges over some existing railroad tracks, as well as bridges over Interstate 10. And we've done extensive coordination with the DOT. There is some more coordination required, and then we've also done some coordination on the bridge itself, how we introduce the track onto the bridge and consider that extra weight, the foundation of the bridge. And then also when it comes to over the railroads themselves, there has to be a railroad agreement. The city has an old agreement, which is more of a maintenance agreement, and we're looking into how can we piggyback on that or minimize the time and effort to get approval from the railroads to place the streetcar system on those bridges that go over those tracks. There are some options of providing some decorative lighting poles, and in some cases the poles will be joint use in terms of a light pole may provide a wire that helps power the streetcar vehicles, but it also may provide illumination through some of these luminaires that you see on this graphic here. And this is just simply a typical situation where you can see on the upper left there's a little block that represents where the track would go. On either side are the two support poles that would hold a wire that holds another wire that would be coming out of the screen that would provide that electricity for the vehicles. And again, everything is at least 18 feet 6 inches or higher, and that's a very typical situation that will be seen downtown. And so that is the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Atherton? I had a quick question for you, Jim. How many of the PCC cars are currently at the airport? Is it a total of 8?
My understanding is it's 6, but I may be wrong. It may be 8.
What kind of look has been, how thorough have those cars been inspected in regards to refurbishing those cars and putting those on, and how tight are those estimates to be able to do that?
The first part of your question is we've had some people in the industry, contractors and people who represent some of the manufacturers, to look at them, and their response was that the vehicles are in very good shape because all they're concentrating on is the condition of the body itself. The fact that they're in a semi-arid area with low humidity has been a good thing. So that has happened. We still want to have an industry review and get further comments from others to make sure that we know what the risks are with regard to costs and such as that. When it comes to pricing, that's something that we still want to talk with the industry about and make sure we know what would be a very good estimate for this type of vehicle versus an alternative type of vehicle.
The when you take the PCC cars, as I understand, all we're looking at doing is taking the shell, and everything is going to be completely new. The propulsion system, the braking, the interiors, the electronics, everything brand new. Is that all fabricated from scratch, or are there manufacturers of these cars where you're kind of buying these components and refurbishing these cars?
Yes, it's not all from scratch. They're standard trucks and standard propulsion systems. This car, we've done 4 of these similar street cars, and they're referred to in the industry as modern street cars. We've done this in Portland and Seattle and Tucson and Tacoma. And so a lot of the technology comes from Europe, and so the trucks and the propulsion systems, there's a certain standard manufacturing industry that exists so that no, they don't have to be created from scratch.
The last question I have is potentially, as we look at costs, an alternative could be a replica car. There are replica cars, and are those cars are basically brand new. Everything in those cars. Is there an advantage of the PCC car over the replica car from a maintenance standpoint, or the replica car over the PCC car, just from a long-term parts availability, maintenance, and ability to source? That's a very good question, and I don't have a single one-sentence answer for you, but I do know that there's 2 main manufacturers in the U.S. There might be a third who would be qualified to do this work. One of those companies specializes on the PCC. The other one specializes in the replica cars. The body of those replica cars are not brand new, but they have already procured those bodies and they have them there. Now they're going to include in the cost of their providing the vehicle, they're going to want to include the cost for their past procurement of those bodies. If we provide the bodies that we have, that should reduce the cost, but then we have to ship the bodies to their plant, so you have to weigh all of those costs. We're looking with the in-house legal people about procurement options to see if there's a way for us to get a true sense of competition between both manufacturers. But again, what we'd like to do even before the procurement is to have an industry review, have people in the industry come to El Paso, come again, look at the vehicles that we have, and from both industries look and see, what ideas are to reduce costs.
How many vehicles are we talking about that will be in service?
How many that we could service at a time?
Well, how many will be in the circulation?
At one time?
Yeah.
That number is roughly 6 to 9.
In the 2 loops?
In the 2 loops. One of the things we have yet to do is work with Sun Metro, who will be operating the system, and work with them to decide issues such as what we call headway. In other words, if you're standing at the stop waiting on the vehicle, how long is the longest that we'd want someone to wait? And that's usually in terms of 10, 15 minutes type of wait. That would determine how many vehicles at a time you would need on the system. But we could accommodate with our maintenance and storage facility, we could store up to 12 vehicles at one time, outside and inside of that facility. So we feel like we have enough vehicles now for the first phase, but there are considerations for future expansion. So, Chairman, to your point, if we use the PCC vehicles initially, and we understand that we actually have access easily to 6 of those vehicles, and the other 3 are not easily accessible to us, even though they're here in the city, there's some sense of ownership of some other parties that have that. But if we go beyond 9 vehicles and we want to expand and we use the PCCs, now we have an issue where we might have to go to the replica cars if we can't procure PCCs from other cities, and then that might result in duplication of parts if you have 2 different types of vehicles.
Funding for phase 2 or 3, but potentially long-term dream, we could potentially send this out to the medical center. Perhaps one day we could begin sending a tram over into Juarez. So the sky's the limit in terms of what we can do here. The only limiting factor is funding. Currently, we only have funding for this particular component, and that's what we're talking about today. Joe, I believe you had a question.
No, I wanted to let the rest of the board know that I attended with Mr. Tez a meeting with city staff, and you were out of town once. There are a number of these cars, I'm not sure what it is, 2 or 3, that are stored by a private entity that wants to get paid for their years of storage. So
That's correct.
just so that the board is aware that there are, I believe, 8 or 9 cars, but some of them are not owned by a private entity, but have some claim for storage that we would have to mitigate.
That's correct. The latest on that is, and my understanding is that there are 6 at the airport. There are 3 held with that private entity, and I understand that Sun Metro will be talking to them to try to get those vehicles back.
Jim, can you, the majority of the work has been done. I think it was a $4.6 million contract over that was performed by URS. The majority of the work has been done, up to really the letting documents. There is some additional relook based on some of the transformation of downtown. Can you just give us a quick high-level overview of kind of what was done and then kind of what's left to finish prior to us getting this to the letting process?
Sure. We did the design until it became evident that funding for construction was not going to be immediately available. So at that point in time, the willingness on some of the parts of the utility companies to continue to work with us and meet with us slowed down. TxDOT review, final review of our plans stopped, and some of that other coordination. So we've accomplished probably 95% design plans and specifications. If we have to go back and look at a different type of vehicle, we would have to revise the specifications for that. So we do have a lot of issues now that the assumption was that the city would be managing the project into construction, and we would have to work with them regarding some of their enterprise agreements that they have with utility companies as to who pays what relocation costs and some things like that. Also, prior to bidding, it's our recommendation to the RMA that we look at having this industry review to make sure that we're not missing something in order to accomplish our goal of having a project that stays in budget but yet is very sensitive to the needs of the stakeholders. And we also suggest the development of more of a rail activation committee, if you will, that involves Sun Metro and Fire and Rescue and some other stakeholders who will tell us that once the tracks are built and once the vehicles start to show up and we put the vehicles on the track, what are some of the performance tests that we actually want to have in order to assure that the system works the way we want it to. For instance, is if a vehicle is going up a hill and for some reason the power goes out, what do we want that vehicle to do? What kind of automatic braking system do we want to have that vehicle just stop so it doesn't roll back down the hill? So that's an example of some of the things that we need. The operations plan, how many vehicles do we need operating at one time? This rail activation committee could help us, again, determine ahead of time what we want so that when we do the final bidding, we're telling the contractors up front, again, once the track is built and the vehicles are delivered and we're testing the operations, we want to make sure that all the stakeholders' input is obtained in the beginning so it's in the specifications and in the plans. And then when we're testing it at the end, there's no surprises.
You know, if we can look at letting this project in 2014, potentially by the end of the year, this is about a 2.5-year project for completion. Is that about right?
That's right. There's 2 main things on the critical path. That's building the track and getting it energized so it's ready for the vehicles. And what normally happens on these types of projects is even if you order 6 or 9 vehicles, the manufacturer usually sends 1 vehicle first. You put that vehicle on the track and make sure that there's not any final adjustments that you want to make to the remainder of the vehicles. So we want to get the track constructed as soon as possible so we can test that first vehicle, and then if everything is good after a couple of weeks, then we tell the manufacturer to go ahead with the final. But they're not holding up on all the other vehicles. They're working on the body and some of the things that they know have to be done.
So it's about a 2.5-year process?
It is. That's another thing where, again, we want to ask the industry, if we get too aggressive on the schedule, the price can go up. If we get too much time, then that gets frustrating to the city. So we want to get that balance of a low price, but yet quickly as possible. So 2.5 years is our current estimate.
My last question is back to the PCC cars. If we had a certain number of PCC cars and we're running a downtown loop every 5 minutes or whatever Sun Metro decides, and every 15 minutes going up Stanton and down Oregon, if we wanted additional cars and replica cars were available, it's really not, it doesn't work to put PCC cars and replica cars together, does it? It's not ideal?
That's not common. So let me answer the question this way by saying most cities don't do that. But that's not to say it can't be done.
So it's kind of all one or the other, depending on what makes the most sense.
We have one of our sub-consultants is a nationwide expert on the vehicles themselves, and we definitely, since this is a question we're asking for the first time, we can ask that question and see if there's a way to have that flexibility.
That's very helpful. Is there any other questions for Mr. Etherton? Jim, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Look forward to visiting with you more as we move this project to letting. Thank you.
We do as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could, there's a lot of interest in the type of cars that will be used. So I think it's important for the record that we recognize, or at least note, that the Regional Mobility Authority is the implementing agency for this project. The City Council has already made a decision to pursue the refurbished existing PCC cars. So we're going forward with that, and unless and until the council changes that direction, we'll move forward. And the other caveat is if the refurbished vehicles don't fit within the 97 million currently available, then we've got to have that discussion again. But the direction has been clear from the city that the PCCs are the preferred option.
Mr.
And of course,
thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I knew that and I understood that, but I think it was important for the board to understand that the City Council directive, as this is their project, we're just implementing it, is for the PCC cars. I do think it's prudent to take a look at the replica cars or the RC cars, and should it become abundantly clear that for whatever reason those make a much more financial operation long-term sense, that we send that information back to the city and let them decide what they want to do. At the end of the day, you are exactly right. This is the city's call.
Well, and that's a good point, what you just mentioned, which is our procurement will be built so that we give the best information to the city. So we'll make sure and do that.
Any other questions? So in regards to item A, B, and C, Mr. Tejas, is there any other information that you want to provide on those?
No, sir. That's it.
Is there any questions for Mr. Tejas on the A, B, and C of item 5? If not, is there a move to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Item 5A, B, and C are approved. Item 6, update, discussion, and action on the following CRRMA projects. A, the I-10 at Airway Interchange Aesthetic Project, Improvement Project, and B, the State Spur 601 Inner Loop Project. I get to drive by Airway pretty much every day. I've been watching this project come out of the ground, and it's certainly exciting to see this come to fruition. So 6A, Mr. Tejas.
Yes, sir. So with us today we have Matt Hardison, who's the project manager for the aesthetic improvements at Airway. So I'll ask him to approach the podium, and I'll ask IT to bring up the PowerPoint. Just very briefly, this is, as the board will recall, the RMA, through the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, agreed to jointly pursue with the City of El Paso and with TxDOT the aesthetic improvement of various, actually looking at the entire I-10 corridor. Through that process, the city and TxDOT and the RMA then ultimately agreed that Airway should be the first aesthetic improvement project from the Comprehensive Mobility Plan. So Airway was selected. We used the City of El Paso's artist through their Museums and Cultural Affairs District, their public artists, and then we actually added a provision that required that nationally known public artist to bring in local apprentices. And you likely have seen the recent articles showing the local artists' work on the actual Airway median. So it's been a really interesting and I think very rewarding project from various angles. But with that, I'll ask Mr. Hardison to walk us through the project progress to date.
Chairman of the board, thank you. I was kind of excited to have Raymond ask me to present this, because here just the other night we started setting some of the sculptures for the project, which is kind of, it adds a level of excitement to the whole deal. First, I want to thank you on behalf of Jordan Foster Construction and letting us take part in this project.
Mr. Hardison, can you just state your name for the record
Matt Hardison.
and your affiliation?
I'm the project manager with Jordan Foster Construction.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. On the slideshow, if they'll pull that up, this is kind of what the project looked like when we got there before we started. As you can see, it's just kind of a lot of gray concrete. There's some deterioration in areas on the paint, and I think it's a great idea to move forward.
It looks a lot like our other interchanges around the city.
Yes, it does, and we're trying to make a change on that. On this next slide, you'll see, starting in the bottom left, we started pulling out concrete and building some sculpture bases, and kind of the process is up. The big block of concrete is where those sculptures that have been placed are sitting right now. You see a beefed up safety rail. One thing that's important to Jordan Foster is the safety of our guys and the safety of the traveling public. So we spent a few extra dollars to make sure that we keep our guys safe and kind of keep, the city safe as well. Through the process, as you look at the larger picture on the right, we've got these big weathered steel sculpture and turbine bases, and some nice rock riprap on the side. And this is something most people will never see, the riprap on the side. But if you look at there's staggered detail on this stuff, so it's something we take pride in, and hopefully, the RMA and the city will appreciate it as well. Next slide is the local median artwork. Kind of our pre-existing condition there on the left with our superintendent, Sergio Porras. I think he's more posing for the picture than anything, but we had a good plan, and we set that median sculpture with little to no issues, and we had the El Paso Times out there, and our photographer / project engineer Marisol took the picture on the right, which is really kind of a great picture. One of the really interesting parts, and it's kind of a hard part of the project, is there's some planer walls that run along the gateway on all four kind of quadrants, which are very detailed. The picture on the left, and you'll look at the tan color, that's the actual color that's going to be out there. These walls and the form liner construction, very detailed, very intricate, and it's the actual form liner, what you see on the left, is from a 5x5 mock-up of these walls. The forms actually come in a 10x10 panel, and we start cutting and trimming them to fit to make the wall shape kind of how the artist wanted. The picture on the right is part of that form liner development. This is a foam cutout of what the wall's going to look like. And that actually takes the correct shape of the wall. They pour polyurethane over this and start flipping this to get the right shape, and that's kind of what we're waiting on right now. But the form liners actually shipped this morning, and next week we should start seeing some of these detailed walls going up. Kind of under the bridge, originally on the picture on the left, we had scheduled to do some more weathered steel column wraps. This posed some issues and some deals that we worked with the artist and Mr. Tejas on. We felt that we could paint these. It's more of a maintenance friendly, and will still achieve that aesthetic look. But these are just the mock-ups going in right now, and we should see that take place probably closer towards the end of September, the painting of the rest of them. On the right is the pavers that actually sit below in that concrete area where the columns are. These are pavers out of Wausau, Washington, that the artist was highly particular for. But those are in on what would be the west side of the project. Your standard under the bridge gray concrete is gone for the most part on both sides. We've put in this mortarless rock riprap, and I think it's kind of achieved what everybody was hoping for. We've had a lot of nice comments on it, and on the right we've got the same kind of Franklin red riprap that'll be along the driving corridor of Gateway East right there. These again are the turbine and ornamental base frames. These big turbines, which I'm about to come up on, are going to stand 50 foot tall off of the freeway, and then the smaller sculptures are anywhere from 6.5 to 7 foot tall. But these are fabricated out in Tucson from a company called Cade Industries, which has done an excellent job. They've worked well with the artist. They've been on schedule or ahead of schedule for most of their work. But the small ones on these things are somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,400 pounds, and the large ones are close to 8,000. So we've had to crane those in. These are the turbine poles that are under fabrication right now. On the left is how they came off the truck, just kind of stacked up. They went into production a few weeks ago, and actually 2 weeks ago we were out with the artist to review the aesthetic look of them. And as you can see, the picture on the far right is the artist rendering of what they're supposed to look like, and then the picture in the middle is the field fabrication. And this will have an additional 8-foot turbine on top of it that will turn and generate electricity. These are the ornamental sculptures that you can actually now see on the eastern side of the project. On the left was the fabrication review out at Cade Industries in Tucson, and the right is when these things showed up on Monday night. And then you can see these things, they're painted extremely bright white, and we've got the lighting set on the east side of the project, which will be a power blast lighting, and which will be programmed to change just about any color, which I think is something everybody is kind of excited about, to get these different colors. You can change it with the times of the seasons. So it's coming along. We won't power up the lighting probably till late September, early October. This picture was out of the request of Mr. Tejas to try to give you guys an idea of how large these sculptures are.
Those are large sculptures.
I'm 6 foot. I'm 6'6", and it's not about an ego, but he was like, you could show one, and I'm like, yeah. So I'm 6'6",
Thanks,
and
Matt.
these things are,
Appreciate it.
6.5, 7 foot tall each. And then on the right is this turbine pole. The turbine pole itself is 42 foot long. So I tried to do an illustration to give you an idea that these things are going to be pretty high up there, and it'll be. And these actually these turbines have larger lighting, power blast lighting, so it'll assume some nice color. The top picture here is again fabrication process at Cage Yard. The picture on the left is Monday night when we were setting the sculptures. We were able to set these a lot quicker than we had anticipated. We anticipated 2 nights, and we were able to set 16 of them in about 2.5 hours. So we've planned well. We've coordinated with TxDOT, with Raymond and ECM, and things have gone off well. Picture on the right is again just kind of where we're at right now. Kind of the look you're getting. The MSE wall there will end up being painted kind of a tan, sandy ridge color. And then again, here's your kind of where we're at right now. Just I tried to compare this. If you look back on the book I gave you, that artist rendering on the front page, this is kind of an in-progress photo, trying to attempt to match that picture. We're pretty close. We got landscaping that needs to go into the median, and the median sculpture is a weathered steel and not a shiny metal, but it's coming along nicely. As far as, I think that's the end of the presentation. As far as what we have left, we've got some rock riprap left to do on the east side of the project. We have the wall construction and landscaping to go in on the east side of the project. We're currently working on the west side, preparing the sculpture bases where these ornamental figures sit that are in the background of this picture. And then this wall construction hopefully will start next week. And it'll start taking a lot more shape here very rapidly. Outside of that, that's really all I have. If you all have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer or willing.
Mr. Hardison, this is, the aesthetics is an important part of this project, obviously, but also the pedestrian amenities, the lighting, and the safety improvements. Can you talk a little bit about how this has improved pedestrian mobility, the lighting, how this underpass is not so dark, and those enhancements that you put in so the board
Correct.
understands kind of the multi-purpose use where we're able to do a number of things?
Well, right now it's kind of difficult. We've got just about everything closed out. But as you said, we've got a lot of lighting kind of staged and ready to go in place once we power this thing up. Under the overpass, it's going to have a lot brighter lighting. I think by adding the different riprap colors and whatnot, it's going to brighten up the whole area. It's kind of a more inviting space to walk through. We're scheduled to restripe the area. We're also going to redo the median islands and crosswalks. We're looking at some options for pedestrian poles to assist with the mobility. I think ultimately it's also going to slow down traffic, so because people are going to be looking a little bit, and and it'll help people crossing in the area, which is, it's difficult right now. When we were taking our pre-existing conditions photographs, you had to be very careful about when you would cross, how to know when to cross, because there's nothing that tells you what to do. But I think those are all items that we're working towards completing. And the lighting aspect, it's going to brighten up the whole intersection and corridor.
So all the pedestrian amenities will be completed along with this at the same time? Everything
Correct.
else is completed?
Correct.
Representative Acosta was very clear that she was behind the project, but one of the keys for her was making this a much more pedestrian-friendly, a much more safer intersection for those on foot.
And we've also replaced and redone the majority of the pedestrian ramps at this time. There's still steps that have to be done to get all of that, the mobility and walking and traveling public, opened up. But that'll take place, sometime in October, where we'll really see it come together. And ultimately on this project, we were hoping to kind of hold off on all the artwork and sculptures and lighting until the very end, and just kind of over the course of 2 weeks, all this stuff show up. But to save time on the schedule and work towards a more expeditious completion, we felt like bringing this stuff in now, and I think it'll maybe prevent some accidents, because we definitely, as we were setting these, people were definitely looking.
They were rubbernecking, huh?
Oh, well, you know what? It was surprising. The cars would stay 4 or 5 car lengths behind everybody, so they would have time to look. I was really floored as we were setting those to watch that happen.
Super. What is the completion date? Are we looking at a October final completion?
We're looking at opening everything up towards the end of October. I know there's a big push for the Transportation Committee meeting at the end of October. Our goal is to have everything done by that time. We might be throwing a few plants in, but for the most part, it should be complete.
So there's going to be a significant amount of landscaping, which you can't see here. Obviously, there's a lot of painting.
Correct.
There's a lot of lighting. The artist, Vicki Scurry, her concept for this, Mr. Tejas and I and Susan and some others have seen this from the get-go, but the concept was flight, mirroring this with, and movement, mirroring this with the El Paso International Airport, really the first intersection that visitors to our city see. And so she's got the moving pieces, the turbines, and just different pieces that suggest or enhance back to the El Paso Airport. So, good. Any questions for Mr. Hardison?
I would just add, thank you for your presentation. It's great to see this coming to life now.
No
and I
problem.
think it's a great way to meet our visitors that come to our community, and I think it's going to be talked about a lot.
Definitely, and Raymond shows up to our weekly meetings, and I kind of give him a heads up, a 2-week look at it, said, hey, you're probably going to be getting some calls, and I think a couple of weeks ago he said, that's interesting. We just got a call this morning about the project, and so it's fun. We certainly enjoy it. It's definitely a different project. It's not your standard roadway or anything like that, so it's fun.
You're ahead of schedule on this project, is that correct?
No, we're on schedule, I would say. Maybe a week or 2 behind right now because of the form liners getting here in a timely fashion. We've moved some things around to try to stay on schedule, but we're working very hard to keep this thing.
Our mantra, ahead of schedule and under budget, so that's what we want.
I'm doing everything I can, or
Right.
we can. So, thank you all.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just one brief note. We brought this presentation forward so you all would be briefed on the project. At the next board meeting, we will likely bring some change orders to you, some deductive, some added items. So we'll talk about that. With any project, you find certain unforeseens. There was some additional roadway that was found once we started digging back, and that sort of thing. And then, as Mr. Hardison mentioned, there was a change by the artist to remove some of the heavy metal items that were going to be on the columns and replace that with paint. So that saved the project some funds. So we're working through all that. In fact, Matt and I are meeting on Thursday to kind of finalize that.
We're pretty close to cost neutral on those additions and deletions, is that
very
correct?
close. We are currently very close. So Thursday, hopefully, I'll have a better feel for where we are exactly. And at the next board meeting, I'll come forward with all of the various change orders and really update you in a little more detail. This was obviously more of a high-level view of the project, where we are and where we're headed. Next time, I'll actually bring you a much more deeper dive into the project itself and talk about what's changed.
If you would, when you visit with Mr. Hardison, review kind of the pedestrian amenities, make sure we're on track there, specifically some of those pedestrian control poles. I don't know if that's part of the project
It
or
is.
if those are additive. So just make sure we're on top of that.
Absolutely, I will.
Good. Item 6B, the State Spur 601 Inner Loop Project. Mr. Tejas?
Thank you. So for this item, I'll be presenting the PowerPoint. If I could ask IT to bring up the PowerPoint. I had been asked by one of the board members to talk about the State Spur 601, the Inner Loop project. We haven't discussed that project in quite some time. As you know, it's ongoing and will be ongoing, at least from the finance side, for several years to come. So I think this is a good time to talk about this. So what we'll talk about specifically are the project details, what it was that was constructed, the timeline, how it was developed, the pass-through financing, which was a huge component and which was really our role in the project, and of course the traffic counts and payments in terms of how that pass-through financing is repaid. And so we'll talk about those areas. So in terms of the project details, we're talking about a 7.4 miles of new roadway construction. And this really came about through the BRAC process, the base realignment and closure activities at Fort Bliss, that was so important to our community at that time and continues to be today. This was a project that was elevated, and the governor of Texas brought in some funds. TxDOT obviously brought in some funds, and the developer was instrumental in getting this project. Once it was completed, it was actually advanced through this unique, innovative financing structure. It was advanced by, I think at the last, by the time we finished it, it was about 7 years ahead of schedule. So this was a huge project for our community. And certainly the huge project for the Regional Mobility Authority. It was our first. We entered into this project, and I think the agency had been together about 6 or 7 months. So it was very young.
Issue debt based on the pass-through finance agreement. So basically a promise for payments at a later date. We use that promise from TxDOT to go ahead and issue that debt to pay for this project, and are being paid by TxDOT based on traffic counts today.
Yes, sir. That's absolutely right. So this project included right-of-way acquisitions, relocations, utility relocations, new direct connectors at US 54, new overpasses, new city streets, and additional access points for Fort Bliss. So as you can tell, these are significant improvements for this corridor. In the end, it really connected US 54 on the west side to Loop 375 on the east side, which was such a huge connection, and was at the southern portion of Fort Bliss. The total project cost, once you include all the construction, all the design, all of the financing components, you're looking at $368,172,000. And that is made up of direct pay from TxDOT, El Paso International Airport, and other sources in the amount of $55,722,000, with an additional $312,450,000 in pass-through. And that $312 million is what the chairman was referring to in terms of the repayments from TxDOT to the RMA, and we'll dive a little deeper into that as we go through this. This is the actual map of the project. It was broken into 4 phases. The very first phase refers to or speaks to the Walter Jones extension that became part of, and Global Reach, which is essentially an extension of Yarborough, which eventually became City Roadway, and then segments A, 2, 3, and eventually B, which was the last component that came on that connected the new roadway to US 54, including the direct connectors. Huge project. In terms of timeline, there was and I should go into a little bit of history here. This was a developer proposed project, which meant it was the developer actually went to TxDOT and proposed the project and said, we, the developer, would provide financing for it up front. TxDOT could pay the developer back over a period of time, yet get the project done today. So it was proposed by a developer. TxDOT negotiated that, went through their process for that type of a proposal, and in the end, on August 30th of 2007, entered into a pass-through toll agreement between TxDOT and the developer, which was J.D. Abrams. After that, and in fact, the groundbreaking event was held in October of that year. By January of 2008, the RMA had been created in July of 2007, and almost immediately thereafter, we got involved in the discussions on this particular project to see how the RMA could assist if we could. So through the first amendment to the pass-through toll agreement, the RMA was actually added as the financial component. So in the end, the RMA served as the conduit bond issuer. So all of those financing costs that the private developer was going to have to incur and then eventually pass on to TxDOT were saved by a public agency, namely the RMA, coming in and issuing public debt through the bonds. So by February of 2008, the RMA actually issued $233,355,000 in bonds. Again, only several months after the creation of the RMA, so it was very quick. By December of 2008, the RMA actually received the bond deal of the year. So it was an innovative financing, as the chair mentioned, on a really quick timeline, and I think was recognized by certainly the bond issuers. And we actually, at that time, one of the board officers, Tanny Berg, and myself went out to New York to accept this award. It was really nice. By March of 2010, the inner loop, as it was referred to, was renamed the Liberty Expressway. And in January of 11, substantial completion was achieved. A ribbon cutting was held in April of 11, and by August of 2011, final acceptance. Very quick turnaround. The chair touched on this, but very briefly, pass-through financing. Essentially, the developer finances, designs, constructs, maintains, or operates a project with their own funds normally. TxDOT comes back over a period of time and pays them back. That's generally the description for it. Specific to pass-through, though, what TxDOT will do in terms of identifying the payback structure, they're counting vehicles. So in our particular case, and actually on another slide, we'll talk about how we do that. So TxDOT is using the number of vehicles using the roadway to identify the payback amounts to the developer. So the intent, obviously, is to expedite projects by using innovative financing to pay for a project today that is paid back by TxDOT over a longer period of time. So as I mentioned, originally the developer intended to issue private debt. We came in and issued that debt, reducing project costs. So again, $233 million in bonds issued by the RMA. We will receive reimbursements from TxDOT in the total amount, not to exceed amount of $312,450,000. The way that we're reimbursed, as I mentioned, is through vehicle counts. We receive 25 cents for every vehicle traveling 1 mile on that roadway, and if that vehicle is under 20 feet. Any vehicle over 20 feet, then we receive 85 cents for that same mile. We've also built into our pass-through toll agreement with TxDOT a minimum and a maximum, and that's important because we obviously have debt to pay back. We have minimum debt service requirements. So without regard to how many vehicles actually use the roadway, we are guaranteed to receive no less, every 6 months, no less than $15,650,000. Yet, if our vehicle counts exceed a certain number, we are maxed out. We are capped at $17,500,000. So each 6 months, we receive between $15.6 million and $17.5. Again, based on the number of actual vehicles using the roadway. We've also built in what we refer to as the administrative fee, which is 0.01% of the outstanding principal of the bonds each 6 months. So each 6 months we receive a payment from the trustee based on 0.01% of the outstanding principal. And what you see here on the far right hand column is the amount to the CRRMA fund. Those are the payments that we receive based on the 0.01%. So to date, we've received $280,000, and as you'll note, invoice number 10, we are actually scheduled to receive on the 15th of this month $16,331.50. Now again, that is 0.01% of the current outstanding bonds. So that's how that works. What you'll also notice in the column to the left of the RMA fund are the actual vehicle counts. So when you count the vehicles based on the 25 cents per mile and the 85 cents per mile, that translates into the amounts that are actually identified under the vehicle count. So as you'll notice, we are still below the minimum. So in that column 1 over under TxDOT payments, we continue to receive the minimum payment amount of $15.6 million. Now I'll note in the first 4 payments, that actually was a great turn of events for us. We were not scheduled to receive any payments until substantial completion was achieved. However, TxDOT released early payments based on the fact that the developer actually started opening segments early. So as I mentioned, there were 4 distinct segments for this particular project. As they opened, TxDOT began paying us on the usage, on the actual usage, actual vehicle counts for those segments. So you'll notice between May of 09 and November of 09, we received actually $893,000 that we were not counting on. So that allowed us to begin paying down the debt sooner, which you'll see on the next slide, has helped us reduce the number of payments that we will make for the outstanding bonds. We were scheduled to go through February of 2022 with payments to actually extinguish the bonds. We have now moved that up to the final payment. It looks like will be made in February of 2021.
Principal payments due of $163 million, and on the previous slide it shows amount remaining to be paid $200 million. So that's based on, there's a bit of a difference based on our early defeasance or taking down of some of those bonds, correct?
That's correct.
And the rest of that money, the difference, I know this is just principal, there's some interest obviously that's part
Correct.
of this, but at the end, if there's a difference, where does that go?
So the difference then is split between the contractor based on early completion. The contractor had certain incentives built in for early completion, and since they met those, the developer gets to share in any remaining funds along with the RMA. So any remaining funds, once all of the bonds are paid for, are then split between the developer and the RMA.
We're only looking at the last principal payment being just a little over 7 years away from now, so it's
Correct.
hard to believe that this facility is coming up really being paid for in the next 7 years.
Absolutely. A great project.
Any questions for Mr. Tejas on? Mr. Tejas, thank you for the update. Let's see where we're at. Item 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to negotiate and execute an advance funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for the development of the Metropia Traffic Management Project. Mr. Tejas, could you properly pronounce that, because I cannot?
No, I cannot either, but we have somebody here that can. We have Xenia Hernandez, who works with the Metropia Group. And I'll ask her to come to the podium. I'll also ask IT to have to bring up that PowerPoint. Ms. Hernandez is going to go through the project for us, but I want to give a little bit of background on this one, because this is another unique project that the RMA is getting involved in, or that I'm proposing that the RMA get involved in, I should say. This Metropia program really is it's a traffic management program, and I'll let Ms. Hernandez really get into the details of it. But in the end, it develops a model that helps the MPO identify, or really helps with the MPO and their congestion management. So the MPO was very interested in this project when it was presented to the Metropolitan Planning Organization. In fact, the MPO actually allocated the funding for this particular project through its processes. However, since the MPO is a planning agency and not an implementing agency, the executive director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization asked the RMA if we would actually serve as the implementing agency, somewhat similar to the streetcar project, in that the RMA is coming in with funds secured through the MPO, and the RMA will assist through the development. We'll contract with Metropia. We will oversee the development of the project and the rollout of the project as well. So that's really the RMA's role in this particular project, is serving again as the implementing agency. In the end, not to steal too much of your thunder, in the end, the deliverables will really, the main component that the users will see is actually an app on your phone that will provide you different routes to and from locations within our community that will help reduce congestion and get you there faster. So that's obviously important to the MPO. The underlying technical data and models developed by Metropia, as I understand it, will be shared with the MPO, which is why the MPO is so particularly interested in this particular project. So anyhow, with that as the background, I'll ask Ms. Hernandez to walk through what Metropia is, how it works, and then at the end we can talk about what the contract is before you under this particular item.
Thank you, Raymond. Good morning. I'm really excited to be here presenting to you all today. I appreciate your time. My name is Xenia Hernandez, for the record. I'll be serving as the program manager for Metropia. In the room, we also have Mr. Jenda Chen, and he's our COO for Metropia. So I'll ask him to stand up. And thank you, Jenda. So today I'm going to be talking to you about our Metropia project. So that's how you say it, Metropia. And I'm going to show you how Metropia can help you improve mobility and enhance the quality of life in El Paso. And this is our Metropia team. And you'll see up here, I wanted to point out our Metropia team because we have a strong El Paso presence in the team. Our founder, Yi Chang Chu, right there at the top left corner, actually was a professor here at UTEP. So some of you might be familiar with some of his work and some of his research while at UTEP. Under him is Jorge Villalobos, who's on the board of directors, and then Jenda Chen. And that partnership actually began here in El Paso, so we like to think of the Metropia home actually being in El Paso, even though our base now is in Tucson. We also have even our operations engineer, who's a UTEP grad, Mario Salomon, and then myself. I was born and raised here in El Paso. And just listening to some of the other presentations, it's really interesting because I actually worked with Federal Highway Administration. I was the area engineer for El Paso. And so I got to authorize Inner Loop. I got to authorize Spur 601. And there's a few people in the room, too, that, you know, we went through the trenches through all those. So that's really exciting to hear about those projects. And I later transferred with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and did the Fort Bliss expansion. So obviously those two major projects, Spur 601, Fort Bliss expansion, huge for El Paso. But I'm here with Metropia today, and I think for me personally, Metropia is important because it has the potential to impact the quality of life for all of us. And specifically in my case, now that I'm raising a family here in El Paso, that's become even more important. So our project goal is to enhance the quality of life, like I said, by supporting you, this CRRMA, and the El Paso MPO to manage traffic congestion and reduce mobile source emissions. And the way that we do that is with our Metropia ecosystem. And I'm going to go into talking a little bit about it. And Raymond already mentioned the app, and that's kind of what I'm going to start with. How does this app work? How is this app actually going to help us improve congestion in El Paso? And so we're talking again, and it's an operation. So unlike your typical infrastructure, high dollar, high construction, high impacts. Now we're talking something very low impact. We're talking something very low cost relative to infrastructure build-outs. And we're trying to pull out as much capacity out of our existing system. And so that's what we're doing with the Metropia and with Metropia. And so up on top, you see a bunch of pictures, and it just kind of takes us over ITS over time. But now with mobile apps, now we have something different that we've never had before. Now we're able to track individual traffic. And so now you have that smartphone that can track that data. So now we have a whole new data set that we haven't had before. So combine that data set, that new data that we have with your objectives and your goals. We combine that, and because Metropia is customizable. So we take your objectives that you're trying to do here in the city, and we combine that with the model. And I can't speak highly enough of Yi Chang Chu. I mean, as far as the model, this is his baby. He's been working on this model for 15 plus years. The model is, we get 85% accuracy on it. You can't top it out there right now. But out of that, like I said, out of our existing infrastructure, we want to pull out that capability, that capacity. And so you can use that capacity so bottom pictures, so you can use it for event planning. In El Paso, air quality is a huge issue, so we pull out mobile source emissions. I understand that one of your major goals is making El Paso be more multimodal. That's another one of the goals that we can help you with. And then, of course, because now with your apps, now we're able to push out messages to those individual commuters, then that means that we're able to impact behavior. And since Metropia, you'll see it's incentive-based, so we'll have incentives built into the system so that people are now changing their behavior. And if you change behavior, obviously in case of, if you look at the right bottom corner, obviously in cases of incident management, that's going to be huge because now you can mobilize a huge amount of people just by sending them a message and telling them where to go for safer places or to avoid certain routes, stuff like that. Just the capability of the system is huge. And again, it's going to vary based on the MPO's goals and the RMA's goals, obviously. And then, of course, we have local. Those incentives, we have, I'll go more into it later, but it's part of the Metropia ecosystem. And with the Metropia ecosystem, you'll see we actually, our employers and our local businesses are a huge component of that. And the whole point being here that everybody's got different needs. Local businesses have different needs. Employers have different needs. Commuters have needs. We're stuck in congestion. We want free-flowing traffic. And of course, transportation stakeholders like yourself, right? You want to take that dollar and make it count as best as you can. So Metropia is that one solution for all of these stakeholders, and that's what we're showing today. And so again, as individuals, why would you want to use Metropia? So these are the top 5 reasons that we think Metropia is so valuable for. But we like to think of Metropia too as almost like a crystal ball. So just to kind of get you thinking about, okay, it's kind of nebulous still. What is this Metropia thing? So when you look at it's an app on your telephone that you see, and we've already developed that app, so that's not what you're paying for. You're paying for the service. And so you'll have this app, and it's we like to think of it as a crystal ball. Like I said, our modeling, 85% accuracy. So it's going to tell you, at this time, on this route, this is the amount of travel time that you would expect.
Ms. Hernandez?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned pay for the service. Is this something the users have to pay for, or do they download the app and they get the information for free?
No, the app is downloadable for free.
Thank you.
So here's a quick demonstration still, if it's still, let me see, a quick demonstration to just show operationally how this is working. And this is a very simplified model.
But Catherine is going to be the pacer for the cars. She's going to make sure that the cars only come on the highway as fast as we can make sure they flow through. So I'm
the
the old
pacer on the
highway,
left is essentially what Metropia is doing.
and Catherine is the new highway.
And on the right, we have the highway, the way it works now.
And
We get the
amazingly
herding
enough,
effect, everybody getting on
by
there at
the
the same
time-
time.
We're all still stuck on the old highway. We'll do it again, Catherine. Everybody can get. We can put twice as many people home in time.
And so that's what Metropia helps you do. It helps you regulate that traffic. It helps you maximize that capacity that you already have. And so just, again, to give you a little more basis on how that app is working, we kind of have a 4-step process of how that model works. So we're partnered with we have a national partner, and we get data. We get weather patterns. We get incident data. We have just a lot of historical data, and we're going to combine that with the new data that we're getting from mobile app, and we're going to synergize it. And so now, as an individual, you see those individual routes, depending on your origin and your destination, you see what individual routes would be most beneficial to you. And so this is kind of what it would look like on the app. And so you can select different departure times, and those different departure times are just based on your flexibility. Some people may have 15-minute flexibility, some maybe even up to an hour flexibility on when they're wanting to leave or able to leave at that. And you'll notice on the right, you have that reward column. And you'll see that those rewards are actually tied to times that are least congested. And so what Metropia encourages you or incentivizes you to do is to select those times that are least congested, and again, in hopes to regulate the traffic. So you select your route, you select your time, and then you actually take that trip. And using GPS, that trip, the actual trip that you take, is validated. So what you say you're going to take, if you actually take that trip, it'll validate it and then give you those reward points. And those reward points can be coupons or just a local merchant, just whatever local merchants decide that they want to use as incentives to bring in traffic into their shops or restaurants or whatever. Or you can even use them for more altruistic purposes like planting a tree or a charity donation. On that app, you'll actually see one of the screens that we have is actually the tree that you see up on top. And so that tree, every time you take a Metropia tree, it's telling you how much CO2 savings you're having on that tree. And for every 200 pounds of CO2 emissions saved, Metropia will actually plant a tree on your behalf.
Hernandez, every time that you're going to go on a trip, you need to, in the app itself, say, this is what my start is, this is where my finish is,
Exactly.
and then Metropia is going to come up with the estimated departures, the estimated travel time, and the reward points?
Right, right. And you can actually, if you have, you can have favorites on there. So if you tend to do a trip regularly, it will be on there as one of your favorites. The other thing too, you can actually reserve trips in advance. So you know what's going to happen tomorrow, so you can actually reserve the trip in advance, and it'll actually do a little light bulb pop-up that says, okay, your trip's about to start, you ready to go, and then you just press start. So you don't have to set it up every time.
Is this already in action? I believe, did I see something where it's already in Los Angeles? Or
Yes, yes, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in the next few slides, but yes, it's actually already live. I just wanted to go over just the difference, because there are other traffic apps out there I'm sure you're aware of, but the difference with them is that they tend to favor highways. So the whole model there is beat everybody else. So you get on there, you get on your app, and the whole point is to beat everybody else. Metropia doesn't do that. Metropia, again, we're avoiding that herding effect by reserving that time and space. So this is a little bit about some of the studies that have been done, that we've done. And there's a few, but these I thought were most relevant. Just this one is done by TTI, so it's done in Austin. And if you take a look at the right-hand column, so if we have 20% of drivers using it, and it's SmartTrek up there, so don't let that confuse you. I didn't want to change it because that's what the studies says, but we used to be called SmartTrek, now we're Metropia. So 20% of drivers using Metropia at 30 minutes, you'll see 17 minutes average daily travel time. And that's compared to 26 minutes that it was before Metropia. So they're seeing a huge time savings there. What's really interesting in the next table, if you look at, again, 20%, those same 20% of drivers using Metropia at 30 minutes, you have 24 minutes. So what we're finding is that even people not using Metropia are actually getting the benefit of Metropia. So versus 26 minutes, they actually got to save 2 times of average daily travel time. In that last chart, the whole point of that one is to show you that as it approaches 30, people's flexibility and departure approaches 30 minutes, we get about 10% of drivers, and with only 10% of drivers using SmartTrek, we start to see benefits overall, region-wide. So that's really exciting. So this is the study that we had. We did do a pilot study in Los Angeles, and so it's live there. And what we saw there is people who are using Metropia, or 74% of Metropia users were saving time. And how much time were they saving? They were saving 6 minutes per trip, which is equal to 40 hours per year, which is a work week essentially. So we like to think of it as what would you give for a week of vacation?
How does Metropia know kind of what the congestion is on the alternate routes besides the highway? So if you route somebody, instead of a highway, you're putting them on a feeder road or a city road. How does Metropia know what the congestion is? Example, yesterday I got caught in that flooding over by University Medical Center. Would Metropia have known that it's bumper to bumper and no one's moving down there? Or how are you aware of that?
It'll have, within the phasing, we do have something scheduled more for incident management, where you'd actually have like an emergency type button where you'd press it and say, help, I'm stuck in traffic, get me out of here. And so again, because we're able to communicate with you, yes, we would be able to know, and we would be able to see where you are and what's going on. A lot of it, again, the model's based on historic data on what's going on, but the beauty of that smartphone is that you have it with you and you're able to communicate with Metropia. So maybe not as fast as you'd like, perhaps, but yes, we would be able to see it.
Is that true for the bridges as well?
I'm sorry?
The bridges
The bridges?
will be included in that monitoring?
At this point, that's not part of the scope of this project. We do have, as part of our scope, is to come up with recommendations for future stuff like bridges, Border Highway West, just anything like that. That is for. We will be looking at that for recommendations on what we can do and how we can implement Metropia to connect those two. Just real quickly, so we're, like I said, we're modifying behavior. By providing those incentives, now people are willing to change, perhaps change their departure time, perhaps change their route, or ideally change both. And then that way we're again, pulling out that capacity from that existing infrastructure. And personally, each person sees about 20% travel time savings. So for El Paso, this kind of goes back to what you were asking about. So yes, we do. We want to see congestion improve in El Paso. We want to pull out that capacity from the system. But we also have the potential to identify future opportunities, like those border crossings, like incident management, and even multimodal choices too. We want to, as one of our phases, we actually want to implement and say, good morning, I notice you take your car every morning. Would you be willing to ride your bike for this part and connect maybe to transit, or ride transit this morning, or maybe ozone action days, maybe, you know, really have a really high incentive for transit.
So are you tracking folks all the time based on their usage, or only when the app is open, or are you tracking their movement even when they're not putting their trip in the app itself?
No, we're only tracking their trips. Yeah, and they're essentially authorizing us for that trip that they're taking.
So
Right.
are you only tracking the trips that they're authorizing, or are you tracking the app all the time when the app is open?
Let me rephrase that. We're only tracking those trips because that's what we're authorized to do. But if they'd like to, there is a screen on there that authorizes us to track them all the time, and we call it like a research option. So they're helping us to do our research, our Metropia research, because we do have a couple of research projects that we're still working, but they have the option to opt out of those. That is one of the screens. So specifically here, we're looking at the Metropia project work plan, and this is essentially what you're buying. So like I said, the app is developed, but what you're buying is the service, so that advanced traffic prediction. And this specifically allows us to customize it to El Paso. So right now we're seeing El Paso wants congestion relief and air quality improvements. Those are the two high priorities that we're getting back now. So obviously the app would be customized to fill those needs. It ties with your local businesses, so that's really cool. Promoting local business, local merchants. They'll be able to come in and work through the Metropia Merchant program. And then obviously the Metropia Agency solution, and that's, again, like Raymond mentioned, that's the big reason why the MPO selected us, is because they want that data, they want those analytics, and they want that support too for transportation decisions. Now you can point back to your data and say, this is why I chose what I chose. Just behind the scenes, we have the intelligence of Metropia, and that's what we call Metropia Dynamics. And these are our go-to-market phases. So in phase one, it's more of a planning phase. But along with that planning phase, you will have a mini traffic management center. And that's, again, that's the customization for El Paso. In phase two, we'll actually go out to market. We'll actually start getting our ambassador program in, where people are starting to use Metropia, starting to expand that base, that foundation. And that's what phase one and phase two. It's about building that Metropia ecosystem foundation, so that in phase three, it's just about expanding and leaving you all with a legacy. So while we're not going to be able to measure quality of life, obviously, but we do have metrics, and every part of the Metropia ecosystem is going to be able to see what those metrics are. So commuters, agencies, employers, you'll be able to experience that routing prediction accuracy. You'll be able to experience travel time savings, and you'll be, with that little tree that I showed you earlier, you'll be tracking your own CO2 savings. Merchants and sponsors, like I said, they can participate in our Metropia Merchant program. So overall, the entire ecosystem is benefiting from each other and just using this one platform of Metropia. This screen shows the overall project cost. So grand total is $1.9 million, and that's broken out mostly in direct labor, a licensing fee, and then mostly the marketing program that we have. And I also want to mention here too that Metropia is actually providing the local match for this project. So that's just to show that, you know, obviously Metropia's home. We believe in El Paso. We want this to work in El Paso. We have a commitment to make it work in El Paso. And so, like I said, we're providing the 20% match. And these are the, just one last slide. So in phase 1, you'll have Metropia Synergy. So it's the service that you're paying for. Like I said, the app is created. You're not paying for that. We've developed it. You're paying for the service. Phase 2, you'll have the software, and that's the software that makes it customizable. That's your mini traffic management center that customizes it to your needs. What data do you need to get out of the system to support your transportation decisions and to influence people's individual transportation decisions? And then finally in phase 3, and I think it's just the future of El Paso, future of Metropia, and we don't know yet what our findings are going to be and what our recommendations are going to be to improving those traffic, or what is it, the border operations, to improving maybe event management, like your ballpark events, or even UTEP events, or just the possibilities are whatever we make them to be. So with that, I'd like to conclude and ask you if you all have any questions.
Question for you.
Sure.
On the very last slide, the traffic management synergy operator console software.
Mm-hmm.
Who operates that?
Who operates that? We manage it.
Okay, so
we'll have, yes,
it's going
in
to be
our
a
office.
turnkey operation then?
Yes, we manage it out of our office.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The total project cost is 1.9, of which the city's required, or the community's required, for a 20% match. Metropia is providing that 20% match.
Right.
How long does that provide services to the community for?
This is a 2-year project.
So, yeah, I can kind of see some of the value from this. If you have all these phones out there and they're all tracking all these trips, whether the users or not, the data of what those users are doing, what routes they're on, where they're at, does that automatically come back to the MPO? Do they own all that data, or does Metropia own that data?
I'm going to defer to Jenda on that one.
Because that would be very handy from a transportation management planning.
Indeed. I'm Jenda. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Metropia. This particular question was also discussed from our meeting 2 months ago with the MPO. The data collected from the user, the ownership remain in Metropia. Under the mutual agreement, we will be sharing the data with the MPO for analysis purpose and for the data modeling purpose. So indeed, the data that we collect from user, particularly for the GPS, reflect the ground truth information, will be able to help us to polish and calibrate our efficiency of the accuracy that we're predicting for the furthermore user. So the privacy data, specifically for the origin or destination, will remain in Metropia without being transferred to any third party.
So after 2 years, the MPO no longer has access to that data based on the term of this agreement. Is that correct? So this agreement's 2 years.
Based on this, right, on this particular contract, but that doesn't mean that they can't extend the contract or get a new contract.
Okay. Agenda, last question. It just so I download that app. Whether I put in my trips or not, that app starts tracking me and showing me all my trips around the community unless I specifically go into that app and turn the tracking off. Is that correct?
In the smartphone app, any of the app that require the GPS data, a user decide by themselves whether they would like to activate the GPS or deactivate that.
But
so
once it's activated in the app itself, it's on until the user deactivates
yeah, so
it, correct?
in the forefront, when the app is being used, we definitely track the GPS data. If the user leaves the app in the background, we remain to track a minimum set of the GPS data with a minimum impact to their battery. But the key purpose is we would like to collect as much as we can from the crowdsourcing, which is indeed a trend that we would like to calibrate the traffic data instead of relies on the national third-party data provider that continue to increase the cost. The Metropia, the beauty of Metropia eventually is a sustainable and scalable model. So eventually we're building this platform that can sustain on its own with the local partnership from the government agency, local business, and most important, the CSR resources from the large company and the employer. And this is actually what our dream. So Metropia actually stands for Metro in Utopia. So that is exactly the reason why we come up with the name of the company and develop this ecosystem like what Xenia has presented well previously in this call.
And currently you've done, as the implementing agency, we didn't decide, all we're doing is putting this in place. So,
Yeah.
I want to educate myself a little more on this process.
Absolutely.
You've only done one other test in LA, is that correct?
We have done several testing so far. The LA test was from 2013 to 2014. We have finished the project 2 months ago in June. And we started the project with Austin and also with New York. So in fact, in 2 months, New York DOT will be announcing the safe driving program called Drive Smart. So this is also part of our beta testing that we plan to work with New York, Austin. And so far, in the current stage, we provide our Metropia service in the top 7 cities. We plan to expand to top 20 cities in 12 months and further serving the metropolitan area. Eventually, I believe that we'll be able to cover 80% of the commuting group in this nation.
Any other questions?
Just a couple. Fascinating. I think it's incredible. In your test environment, what was the percentage of commuters or individuals that participated in the test?
Surprisingly, there are actually more than 65% of the commuters, they are willing and having the flexibility to adjust their departure time and route.
So 65% of the LA commuters
Yes.
participated in the test?
Yeah, so
Is that
in the,
true for Austin
in the LA
as well?
testing, we have more than 200 users, and we collect more than 2 million of the GPS points throughout the 18-month period. And we initially understand that 60 to 65% of the users are willing to adjust their time and the departure route using Metropia. And as time grows, we start seeing the significant increase of the behavior changes along with the incentive. And that's the beauty of the platform. We are able to inject the incentive from not just the government, and also from Metropia or the local business. So for any of the local restaurants would like to promote their light business hour with their freebies or coupon or incentive, we are able to provide that information to the targeting user. And the marketing efficiency is way better than any of the digital marketing platform that we have to see the option today.
I think Ms. Melendez was a little confused. It wasn't 65% of the LA commuters, but of the commuters that participated, 65% were willing to change their departure time. How many commuters?
Yes,
200 were in the LA test. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Got it. Any other questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Tejas, I think there's a funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for, when I looked at it, was it 1.4 million? Is that what, approximately?
Yes, sir. So, as mentioned, there are federal funds approved by the local metropolitan planning organization.
And these
for
funds
this.
are coming from FHWA, Federal Highway, is that correct?
Correct. So the federal funds, as all federal funds for our region, go through the MPO, but TxDOT is actually the delegated authority for federal funds that come through. So anytime that we, just like you saw with the streetcar project, anytime we go and get funds through TxDOT or from TxDOT, we have to enter into an advanced funding agreement. So what you have before you under this particular item is the draft advanced funding agreement between TxDOT and the Regional Mobility Authority. As mentioned, Metropia will actually be providing the local match of $387,600. The remaining amount of $1,550,400 will actually come through the federal component. So
what is the timeline for accessing those federal funds?
Well, we're actually in that process right now. FHWA is reviewing this project for approval. Once we receive approval at that point, then we execute this agreement with TxDOT, and at that point, the last step is what's referred to as a letter of authority, an LOA from FHWA. Once we receive that, then we're at that point authorized to enter into an agreement with Metropia. We have a draft of that agreement. However, we've not spent a great deal of time going through that yet because we need to go through the federal approvals and make sure that goes through. This is fiscal year $14, which means that technically they're federal funds. The fiscal year for the federal agency is the end of October, or no, I'm sorry, the end of September. The end of the fiscal year for TxDOT, though, is the end of August. So TxDOT shoots for all of these to be executed and in place before the end of August. So we should know fairly soon how quickly this is going to go.
So our role here strictly is the agreement with Metropia for the payments, making sure those certain milestones are met for those payments, but that's the end of our agreement, and all the rest of basically the back and forth goes with the El Paso MPO and Metropia. Is that correct?
Ultimately, as the ultimate user of the data, it will be the MPO. So really what the RMA's role is really kind of twofold. We have an agreement with TxDOT to provide the funds from TxDOT to the RMA. And then we have an agreement with Metropia to actually pay them, providing that they meet all of the milestones and everything required of them within the contract with the RMA and Metropia. So assuming FHWA approvals come through, assuming TxDOT signs off on the advanced funding agreement, assuming all of those things happen, letter of authority as well, then I will be back to you all with the direct agreement between the RMA and Metropia.
Since I've asked already a lot of questions, is there any other questions for Mr. Tejas? If not, is there a motion authorizing the executive director to negotiate and execute an advanced funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for the development of the Metropia Traffic Management Project?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 7 is approved. I'd like to skip back up real fast to 5C, the advanced funding agreement for the Texas Department of Transportation on the streetcar. Can you let us know kind of where that's at and when we anticipate access to those $97 million? Because one of the questions I didn't ask earlier is we've only got that $125,000 available from the city to kind of begin some of this preliminary work. Can you give us a quick update on when that $97 million will become available, Remy?
Sure. Ultimately, that answer I can't give you. This is in TxDOT's hands. Although the draft advanced funding agreement that you all have is the most recent and has been tentatively approved by the district. So it's now in Austin, awaiting approval from the Austin folks. So this advanced funding agreement is actually very close. Once we execute that, actually, it's really at that point a process at TxDOT's level as well to amend the STIP, which stands for Statewide Transportation Improvement Plan, to roll it into that latest amendment. Now that I can't tell you when it'll happen, unfortunately, but I'll ask TxDOT for an update and I'll share that with you all this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Tejas. Item 8, update, discussion, and action on the following instruments with the Texas Department of Transportation as they relate to the Border Highway West Extension Project. A, the escrow, paying agent, and assignment and assumption agreements, and B, the first supplement to Memorandum of Understanding. Mr. Tejas.
Well, I was hoping today under item 8A to provide the final copies of the escrow, paying agent, and administrative assignment and assumption agreements as we discussed in the last meeting. I did actually receive the final versions of the escrow agreement as well as the assignment and assumption agreement. So those were signed late yesterday and sent off to TxDOT. So I should have those executed before too long. TxDOT, by way of update, TxDOT has actually moved up the closing date that they anticipate with the developer to August 20th, which is good news. So they're moving quicker than they had originally anticipated. So we, like I say, have executed the escrow agreement as well as the assignment and assumption agreement. Those are on their way to TxDOT now. The paying agent and the first supplement are still items that we are hammering out with TxDOT. In fact, we have scheduled a conference call for tomorrow morning to hammer out the last remaining item for those two agreements. So we're very close, and we've actually moved this thing extremely fast. This has been these agreements have come together really very fast. We've gotten really great help and cooperation from TxDOT and all of our folks to make sure this thing is drafted correctly. So I did want to talk a little bit about the first supplement because that's the first time that you've heard of this under item 8B. If you recall, This project, as I mentioned last month, this project has been moving so quickly. I actually asked for and received authorization from this board to execute other instruments related to the Border Highway West project that we needed to put in place before the funds could be drawn down to the Regional Mobility Authority before the end of August. But I also mentioned that if and when there are additional instruments, I would bring them back to the board. So this is the additional agreement that we hadn't anticipated last month. What it really amounts to is when you look at the original paying agent agreement, the escrow agreement, and the assignment agreements, they had provisions in there that were really technical in nature that ought not to be in those particular agreements. So TxDOT, what they've done is they've pulled out some of those and placed them into what they're referring to as the supplement to the MOU. So going back in time, you'll recall that there was a memorandum of understanding between the parties, between the RMA and TxDOT at the very beginning of the discussions on this particular project, which really outlined the terms and conditions of any relationship that we got into. So that MOU was then authorized by this board to execute, and that framed the paying agent, the administrative agent, and the assignment agreements. So what we're doing here, and you'll notice under 8B, as included in your backup, we're actually amending the original MOU to make certain revisions. The largest one and the most important one is reducing the amount of the Texas Mobility Fund grant to the RMA from TxDOT. Originally it was, if you recall, it was $600 million. They're dropping it down to $500 million. The reason for that, as we've discussed, is that the bids have come in for this particular project much lower than originally anticipated, so less funds are actually necessary, which is great for everybody. So they've reduced the amount of funds that are coming to the RMA, and then you'll see throughout this particular supplement there are various other kind of cleanup items and various tweaks that we've made through our discussions since the beginning of this. So what you have before you then is a draft. So what I'll be asking of this board through this particular item is authorization to execute a supplement to the MOU in substantially the same form as attached. Now, of course, just as I committed in the last board meeting, once these become final and executed, I will bring them back to the board and highlight any amendments that we've made. A final note, I think I touched on this, but to reiterate and kind of emphasize it, the closing date for this particular project has moved up to August 20th, which means everything's moving a little bit quicker. So this supplement to the MOU has got to be executed here within the next couple of days. I think we're close. As I mentioned, our attorneys have scheduled a conference call with TxDOT's attorneys for, I believe that's scheduled for tomorrow morning, in fact. And hopefully we can iron out that final item and put pen to paper and get this thing done.
So the $500 million has to be transferred to us prior to August 20th, correct?
Prior to August 26th is still our back-end deadline. But the idea is if we get all of these documents executed before the 20th, then we'll have plenty of time to get that done. In fact, TxDOT has already secured and hired the paying agent as well as the administrative agent or the escrow agent. They hired them, I believe, 2 days ago. They've provided us that information, and I've begun working with them to set up the escrow account and have everything ready for when these documents are finalized. So we're doing all of that legwork, that upfront legwork to get everything ready for us for the 26th.
So what we're looking for here is a motion from the board to approve the first supplement to memorandum of understanding with any changes that will be made being brought back to the board for final approval. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion along those lines?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? 8B carries. 9, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute an engagement letter with Pena, Briones, McDaniel and Company, a certified public accounting firm, through August 31st, 2016. Mr. Tejas.
So as you all may recall, and in fact, actually items 9 through 12 all impact the final item, which is the fiscal year 2015 proposed budget. This item, you may recall, we use Pena, Briones, McDaniel and Company. We've been using them for several years as an outside CPA firm to the RMA. Now, let me talk a little bit about their role. We've secured Clifton Larson Allen as our outside auditor, so they provide our auditing service each year as required by statute. What we use Peña Briones for is the day-to-day activities, the accounting activities that the city provides to us as fiscal agent. They interface between myself and the city to make sure that all of those accounting activities were booked correctly, that all of the reimbursements were made. All of our books are in order so that when Clifton Larson Allen comes, all of our books are in order, and we go through those auditing steps in the best light. So Peña Briones is a hugely important component to our organization. So what you see before you then is an engagement letter for the coming 2 fiscal years. And I'm proposing that it's a not-to-exceed amount of $20,000, which means really we're spending about $10,000 a year with Peña Briones. So subject to your questions, I'm recommending approval on this particular item.
Any questions from the board on item 9?
Just one, why did we do a 2-year contract, right, instead of a year? Why did we decide to go out 2 years?
Well, we can certainly do an annual. I think this was more of a kind of a record-keeping thing. It's easier on a 2-year basis. But we can certainly do a single year for a $10,000 amount.
Okay, just curious.
I'm okay. It's a small amount, $10,000 per year. They provide a valuable service for us, but I'm certainly willing, if the board has any objections to a 2-year, to request that Mr. Tejas take it to a 1 year.
I'm fine with the 2-year. I just was curious on why we went out 2 years instead of 1.
Administratively, I think it probably makes it a little easier on us, so we don't have to prove this every year.
Ultimately, that's really the answer. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is there a motion to approve item 9?
So moved.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 9 is approved. Item 10, similar to item 9, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a consulting services agreement with Terry Casada, DBA Casada Data Management Services, through August 31st, 2015.
So
Mr. Tejas?
this item, as you may recall, we've been using Ms. Quesada for several years now as well. Ms. Quesada, unfortunately, had a family emergency, so she couldn't make it this morning. But to give a brief background on her, she worked for the city of El Paso for many years. When she retired, she had really kind of developed an expertise, an area within which she really, I think, worked extremely well, which is serving almost as a liaison between the city of El Paso and the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So when she retired from the city of El Paso, I actually asked her if she would serve as a consultant to the RMA to really serve that same role, to help the RMA serve as a liaison between the RMA itself and the MPO as well, which she's done, I think, extremely well over these last couple of years. She's really helped with that. Outside of that, this last fiscal year, I've actually also asked her to help out with the annual report that we do each year. And the strategic, I should say, the strategic plan, which you all will hear from her before too long. We've got to develop our strategic plan for 2014. So she's been working on that as well. So she's kind of branching out from the MPO services and doing a little bit more for us. So she's been a great help, and I'm asking that we essentially just renew her annual contract that we enter into with her each year. We've got a maximum not to exceed amount on this one of $25,000. For background, this past year she is invoiced under $10,000 through, I believe it was last month. So I don't anticipate hitting $25,000. However, with this RMA, as you know, projects come up quick, and we need services fast. So oftentimes it's nice to have Terry Casada there for me to give a call if we need some additional services. But subject to your questions, I'm recommending approval on this one as well.
Questions from the board? There's a motion to approve.
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 10 carries. Item 11, discussion and action on a board resolution approving the executive director's annual performance evaluation, authorizing the CRRMA chair to communicate the results of the evaluation to the city of El Paso and take other actions as necessary. As this is a personnel matter, I'm going to ask for a motion that we retire. I see Mr. Gordon coming up. Mr. Gordon, please come on up.
Yes, I've just said you can consider this item as a personnel matter in executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. As this is a personnel matter, we will consider this item in executive session. So is there a motion to retire to executive session?
So moved.
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are moving to executive session at 10:48 a.m. For the Mr. Tejas, are you ready?
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
It is 11:14 a.m. on Wednesday, August 13th, 2014, and the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority has retired from executive session, and we are reconvening the board meeting.
Mr. Chair, could I get a motion to reconvene? We have to.
Okay, I didn't quite sure. Is there a motion to reconvene the board meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Thank you.
We are back in session. For the record, Mr. Tejas, I'd like to note that we've been here 2.5 hours, and the city only allows me 2 hours of parking, and I'm not going to be happy if I've got a friendly reminder from the city on my car today.
Well, depending on how this item goes, I may cover that for you.
For the record, that's only in jest.
Yes.
So just
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Item 11, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing an executive director annual performance evaluation, authorizing the CRRMA chair to communicate the results of the evaluation of the city of El Paso and take other necessary actions. Per the employment agreement, I'm asking for a motion to authorize the increase based on the evaluation of exceeds expectations for Mr. Tejas' performance evaluation.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, you ought to have a motion approving the resolution that was posted.
Super. Is there a motion to approve the resolution that was posted?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion is approved. Mr. Gordon, I think that's all we needed to take care of on item 11. Is that correct?
That would be correct, sir, if I may be excused.
You can. Thank you very much for your assistance today, as always. See you next year. Item 12, discussion and action on a board resolution adopting the CRRMA's investment policy to incorporate the City of El Paso's recently readopted investment policy as the city serves as the fiscal agent to the CRRMA. Mr. Tejas?
So as the chair read into the record on the caption, the City of El Paso serves as the fiscal agent for the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. And as such, I should mention, as a public agency, we have to adopt an investment policy each year. The City of El Paso, serving as a fiscal agent for the RMA, adopts their own investment policy each year. So what the RMA does then is we simply adopt their investment policy with certain tweaks incorporated into the resolution that adopts their investment policy. So what you have as backup for item number 12 is that cover resolution, which makes those specific tweaks that are unique to the Regional Mobility Authority here. And then included as an attachment to that resolution is the City of El Paso's recently adopted investment policy. So subject to your questions, I would recommend approval.
Those changes are relatively minor, and they apply to the guaranteed investment contracts. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Where we've made certain obligations in regards to the investment of those funds, and basically that's how they will be handled by the city.
That's correct. So those specific tweaks built into the resolution were developed by our bond counsel and reviewed by our financial advisor. And that's where those come from.
So those were developed outside, reviewed, and those are the only changes to the investment policy.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Tejas? There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 12 is approved. Item 13, discussion and action on a board resolution adopting the CRRMA budget for fiscal year 2015. I believe this was just reviewed with the Finance Committee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The Chair, Mr. Parker.
Mr. Chairman, the Finance Committee met yesterday, August 12th, 2014. We reviewed the budget for fiscal year 2014 and 15 and did a comparison. We recommend the approval of the budget for the coming year 2015.
Any questions from the board in regards to the budget as presented? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Mr. Parker, thank you on behalf for work at the Finance Committee to sort through all the details. So.
And Ms. Melendez
Ms.
also.
Melendez as well, thank you.
She helped a great deal.
And Mr. Volk. I believe that is the last item. Mr. Tejas, is there anything else that we need to follow up on or discuss?
Nothing from me other than thank you for the evaluation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Tejas. It is a pleasure working with you. I can't think of a better executive director. We appreciate your hard work and diligence The board, even though we have several new members, is grateful for your communication, for the way that you're able to move these rather complicated agreements and get them to closure, and grateful for your continued service to the board, to the community, to the region. Thank you, Mr. Tejas.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
It is 11:19 a.m. Is there on Wednesday, August 13th, 2014, is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Second. All those in favor? Aye. And we are adjourned. Thank you.